Under the creaking rafters of abandoned cabins and the sigh of reclaimed lumber, Johnny Jett first discovered his calling. Born in rural West Virginia, he grew up peeling bark from hickory logs beside his grandfather's barn, mastering basic joinery by age 10 and wrestling with rusty tools that whispered history. While other boys his age clamored for video games, Johnny craved the scent of sawdust and the thrill of uncovering timbers reclaimed from mountain homesteads abandoned during the coal bust. His teenage summers found him roaming old logging camps, notebook in hand, sketching plank dimensions and sketching plans for rebuilding fallen cabins. Every splinter and every weathered board told a story to him, a story he was determined to preserve and share. After high school, Johnny studied architecture at a small college in Virginia but dropped out when he realized his passion lay not in blueprints and theory, but in the raw tactile world of salvage. He apprenticed under local craftsmen who taught him to differentiate heart pine from poplar by heft and grain, to spot hidden nails with fingertips, and to coax warped floorboards back into line with measured steam. His reputation grew among property owners who reached out to him when they wanted to rescue century-old barns from demolition rather than see them shoved into landfills. In 2015, a producer scouting restoration talent for a new DIY network series invited Johnny to join Barnwood Builders, a project that would catapult him from local woodworker to household name. On screen, Johnny's quiet intensity stood in contrast to the boisterous energy of his co-host, Mark Bowe. Where Mark teased and bantered, Johnny focused on the joints and the nails, often lingering close-ups on his precision tenon cuts or the satisfying click of reclaimed flooring locking into place. Viewers admired his craftsmanship and his modest demeanor. He became known as the series' resident wood whisperer. Season after season, he helped dismantle log cabins, painstakingly cataloging each timber before hauling them to his workshop. His edits revealed how aged wood, once scraped clean of paint and rot, revealed pin knots and sap streaks that lent each beam unique character. Fans learned to identify shiplap profiles and the subtle curvature of hand-hewn timbers only Johnny could source. Then, in the winter of 2018, rumors began to swirl. A social media post from an old classmate mentioned Johnny's departure from Barnwood Builders but offered no explanation. Viewers logged in weekly, searching for his familiar figure in signature knit caps and tool belt, only to find his space filled by a guest carpenter. No official statement explained why the series' most meticulous craftsman had stepped back. Online forums speculated wildly. Was it creative burnout? A falling out with producers over on-camera edits? Or something more personal, perhaps a family emergency drawing him back to West Virginia? Behind the scenes, a different narrative quietly unfolded. Reports surfaced of growing tensions over Johnny's role in design decisions. Producers, eager to streamline episodes for episodic drama, often cut away from Johnny's careful restoration process in favor of faster reveal sequences. He objected to truncating nuanced steps, like the month-long curing of milled posts or the precise alignment of dovetail joints, arguing that viewers deserved the full story of how each timber transformed. Insiders claimed family-run production clashes reached a tipping point when a key episode about rebuilding a 200-year-old farmhouse aired with crucial milling segments removed. Johnny allegedly confronted executive producers, insisting on creative control, and was told that reality television required certain compromises, but the full context extended beyond on-set disagreements. During the same period, Johnny's wife faced a serious health challenge, necessitating his presence at home. Juggling long location shoots and hospital stays proved impossible. Producers initially granted him a short hiatus, promising a cameo return once circumstances stabilized. Yet as months passed, the season arc shifted focus to other cast members. Hometown responsibilities, too, beckoned. Johnny was offered a contract to teach advanced timber framing courses at a local community college, allowing him to nurture apprentices the way he once learned from mentors. The choice felt inevitable, a return to hands-on education, away from the glare of TV, where he could balance family and craft without deadlines driving every cut. Even as fans lamented his absence, Johnny's departure was not a vanishing act but an evolution. He launched his own digital channel, sharing detailed workshops on selecting lumber, restoring barn doors, and designing eco-friendly post and beam sheds. His subscriber base swelled, drawn by his willingness to dive deep into joinery details that network TV rarely allowed. Meanwhile, he consulted on commercial restorations, turning defunct grist mills into community centers and staging historic schoolhouses as event venues, all while still swapping stories with former Barnwood colleagues over video calls. Though he never publicly aired grievances against Barnwood Builders, insiders say he left with respect for the team and gratitude for the platform that introduced rustic reclamation to millions. So what really happened to Johnny Jett? He traded the constraints of episodic television for the freedom to teach, to experiment, and to focus on what first ignited his passion: the satisfying scrape of old barn planks, the careful scribing of mortises, and the joy of passing on hard-earned skills to the next generation. He remains a steward of heritage timbers, but now his audience learns from him at their own pace, one detailed tutorial, one reclaimed beam, one patient joint at a time. After leaving the network cameras behind, Johnny found his workshop transformed into a creative laboratory where he could explore every idea without episode runtimes dictating the pace. He purchased an aging grain silo near his hometown, converting its circular footprint into a 2,500 square foot woodworking studio. Within those corrugated steel walls, he assembled a collection of vintage machinery: a restored 1940s power saw, a decades-old jointer he'd saved from a shuttered mill, and a custom dual-head planer built by a local craftsman. He called it the Silo Lab and invited local apprentices to train under him. Word spread quickly. This wasn't a televised project, it was a genuine mentorship program, rooted in the same values Johnny had absorbed from his grandfather. His digital channel, Timber Revival, became the bridge between Barnwood Builders fans and his deep-dive teaching style. Weekly, Johnny posted episodes showcasing entire restoration processes, from stripping layers of lead paint to micro-milling tongue and groove boards from reclaimed timbers, without a single second cut for TV drama. Subscribers praised the unhurried pacing and candid narration. They saw every planing pass, every chisel nick, and understood how patience, not spectacle, ultimately yields lasting craftsmanship. As one comment read, "I never thought I'd watch an hour on mortise and tenon joinery, but Johnny makes it riveting." That unexpected sentiment highlighted the hunger for authenticity, proof that enthusiasts craved substance over sensational edits. Beyond tutorials, he offered community workshops on historical preservation. At an annual barn rescue event, Johnny led teams of volunteers to carefully dismantle a 150-year-old tobacco barn slated for demolition. Participants traveled from neighboring states to elbow-deep in aged nails and warped boards, documenting each step in personal journals. Under his guidance, they learned how to number timbers, create splice sleeves for damaged posts, and store materials properly during seasons of humidity. When the barn's framework finally rose in a reclaimed pine pavilion at the local farmers' market, survivors of that intensive weekend carried home more than wood. They carried a living lesson in stewardship. Simultaneously, Johnny spearheaded the nonprofit Barnwood Heritage Trust, a project he'd quietly launched the year after his TV exit. The Trust's mission: to save endangered barns across Appalachia by offering grants and volunteer labor. It partnered with historical societies, land trusts, and universities. Under his leadership, dozens of endangered structures found new life as community centers, art venues, or educational hubs. In one instance, the trust restored a log cabin once owned by a pioneering female doctor, turning it into a rural health museum. Local newspapers ran front-page stories honoring Johnny's work, dubbing him Appalachia's timber guardian. Though the TV spotlight had dimmed, his regional influence shone brighter than ever. Of course, stepping away from Barnwood Builders meant financial risks. Television contracts paid six-figure sums per season, self-funded nonprofits did not. Johnny confronted tough choices: expand the trust or keep his tuition-free apprentice program? Invest in studio equipment or allocate funds for rural community outreach? Rather than choose fame over values, he opted for a leaner lifestyle. He sold off rarely used power tools, downsized from a suburban home to a renovated cabin on reclaimed oak pilings, and committed to earning every inch of workspace. His frugal measures resonated with followers who saw in him a craftsman unafraid to live his principles. His candid discussions of cash flow management and project budgeting formed a surprising but popular series on his channel, proof that financial transparency can deepen trust. Then, in late 2019, something unexpected happened. A message from Barnwood Builders producer landed in his inbox. They developed a special anniversary episode and wanted Johnny to return as a guest, to compare restoration techniques from the show's early seasons with his evolved methods. The invitation came with creative banners, director's cut access, co-producer credit, and free rein to script his segments. Social media blew up at the news. Fans clamored, "Bring back Johnny," and "Showdown, Studio vs. Silo Lab." Yet, Johnny's reply surprised many. He declined. He appreciated the offer but explained that his art required consistency, not nostalgia. Trading one form of show-driven compromise for another felt like backsliding. Instead, he suggested they send a camera crew to film his silo lab operations, then develop an independent special highlighting both perspectives, bridging TV and his independent world. That counteroffer reflected Johnny's commitment to collaboration without sacrificing his evolved approach to restoration. In early 2021, PBS picked up his proposal. The resulting documentary, Barnwood Builders, Roots and Rebellion, juxtaposed the network's series' brisk 10-minute time lapses with a full day at his silo lab, revealing how deep study and methodical work unlock hidden structural integrity in reclaimed beams. Viewers saw contrast framing at its best, prepackaged entertainment versus raw exploration. The reception was profound. Longtime fans wrote letters. The PBS special Barnwood Builders, Roots and Rebellion aired to overwhelming acclaim, with viewers praising the stark contrast between television's staged highlights and the unedited rhythms of Johnny's silo lab. Letters poured into his studio thanking him for finally lifting the curtain on the patient work behind each reclaimed beam. Historians lauded the documentary for preserving critical restoration knowledge that often vanishes in fast edits, and fans who initially discovered Johnny on network television celebrated his return in a format that honored his commitment to authenticity and depth. Within days of the premiere, Timber Revival subscriptions skyrocketed. Longtime enthusiasts and new converts alike flocked to watch extended footage from the silo lab, where Johnny's commentary on wood sourcing and moisture testing offered rare glimpses into the subtleties of timber construction. Brands specializing in sustainable building materials approached him for partnerships, intrigued by his methodical approach and loyal following. He declined most offers that felt too commercial but agreed to consult on a limited edition hand tool set produced by a heritage toolmaker in Pennsylvania. Soon, invitations arrived to speak at woodworking festivals and preservation symposiums across North America. Johnny delivered keynote addresses that blended personal anecdotes with technical demonstrations, illuminating why timber framing is as much an art of listening to the wood's history as it is a science of structural principles. His appearances shifted the narrative at these events from nostalgia to tangible skill building, inspiring attendees to rethink salvaging practices in their own communities. Organizers reported waiting lists for his workshops that stretched for months, evidence of his influence beyond a mere television face. Meanwhile, the Barnwood Heritage Trust expanded under Johnny's leadership. He established regional affiliates in states from Kentucky to Maine, recruiting volunteers and experts to survey endangered structures. One notable project involved restoring a Civil War-era tobacco drying barn in rural Virginia. Under the Trust's guidance, apprentices meticulously replaced compromised rafters with beams milled on site from salvaged oak trees, then documented the process in instructional booklets distributed to local schools. Community members frequently thanked Johnny for preserving a tangible piece of their collective memory for future generations. On the home front, Johnny leaned on family support more than ever. His wife Jenny and their 2 sons began visiting the silo lab on weekends, helping sort reclaimed nails and pack small samples for mill tests. The sight of children proudly wearing miniature tool belts underscored the intergenerational nature of his mission. Although network shooting schedules had once strained his personal life, the new rhythm allowed for more predictable hours and family dinners around the farmhouse table he built by hand. Late nights often found him recording voiceovers for his digital series and transcribing plans for an upcoming book, tentatively titled Reclaimed Wisdom, A Guide to Timber Heritage. The manuscript pairs practical step-by-step illustrations with stories of barns that shaped rural communities over centuries. Publishing offers arrived from specialized presses, drawn to his authentic narratives and detailed craftsmanship. Johnny hopes the book becomes a standard reference for both amateurs and professionals seeking to ensure that the skills he demonstrates digitally live on in print form. Environmental preservation remains central to Johnny's philosophy. He frequently writes and speaks on how timber reclamation reduces carbon footprints by extending the life of existing materials instead of relying on freshly cut lumber. In articles for green building publications, he analyzes the long-term benefits of adaptive reuse versus new construction, weighing energy costs of demolition debris against the embodied energy within centuries-old beams. His balanced, data-informed arguments have shaped policy discussions in several local planning commissions. Looking ahead, Johnny envisions transforming a defunct textile mill in his hometown into a public timber arts museum and training center. He is in negotiations to secure funding and historic landmark status for the site. The planned museum will exhibit salvaged structures, host rotating tool exhibits, and feature interactive workshops for children and adults. A digital archive will complement the physical space, housing video tutorials, oral histories, and 3D scans of historic joinery techniques accessible worldwide. In the end, what really happened to Johnny Jett can be summed up as a transition from a television craftsman to a steward of timber heritage. By embracing independent platforms, teaching directly at his own pace, and founding organizations that multiply his efforts, he has ensured that the lessons and techniques behind Reclaimed would survive well beyond any broadcast season. As apprentices, historians, and DIY enthusiasts carry forward his standards of patience, precision, and profound respect for the material world, Johnny's true legacy emerges, a living network of learners keeping the art of timber restoration alive. His ongoing journey exemplifies how one craftsman's passion can awaken a movement of mindful restoration. Since the PBS special reaffirmed Johnny's commitment to depth over drama, he soon found mainstream outlets seeking him out, and not just in wood shops. Discovery Channel approached him to helm a limited series called Beyond the Barn, where he would travel internationally to salvage vernacular structures, from Swedish timber barns to Japanese kura storehouses. The offer carried a six-figure budget, full creative input, and a producer's credit. Yet when filming began in early 2022, Johnny faced familiar tensions. His instinct to slow down for methodical restoration often clashed with production schedules demanding dramatic reveals. During a shoot in rural Sweden, he refused to bypass the week-long kiln drying process that ensured reclaimed beams wouldn't warp in a humid climate. Executives threatened to cut the segment, but crew members rallied behind him, insisting that authenticity was the show's only true selling point. In that moment, Johnny realized that his influence extended far beyond his own projects. He was shaping the very ethos of restoration television worldwide. At home, this newfound visibility brought fresh responsibilities. After the first season of Beyond the Barn aired to critical praise, he received invitations from historic preservation commissions across North America and Europe. He testified before congressional committees advocating for stronger incentives to preserve rural heritage structures, arguing that grants and tax credits should favor adaptive reuse over demolition. His speeches often referenced detailed case studies from his nonprofit work, illustrating how each saved barn or mill localized cultural memory and supported sustainable economies. On one occasion, he stood in a Washington hearing room, holding a piece of hand-hewn heart pine he'd reclaimed from a condemned tobacco barn. He explained how every splinter represented decades of community stories that would vanish without policy protections. Lawmakers, many unfamiliar with timber techniques, leaned forward, captivated by the tangible artifact in his hand. Despite these high-profile engagements, Johnny continued to center his craft in community. He launched an annual Barnwood Builders Masonry and Timber Conference at his silo lab, drawing masons, timber framers, historians, and architects for a multi-day symposium. Each year's theme focused on under-resourced traditions, one year on earth-fast log construction in pioneer settlements, another on the nuances of barn-raising rituals that knit communities together. Participants toured his workshop, attended lectures on moisture content testing, and worked side by side during hands-on workshops. The conference grew from a local gathering of 50 to an international event drawing hundreds, funded by modest sponsorships from toolmakers and heritage organizations who respected Johnny's values. Social media buzzed with attendees proclaiming how Johnny's approachable teaching style and policy advocacy empowered them to launch their own preservation projects back home. Of course, not every step forward was smooth. When a major museum invited him to curate an exhibit of reclaimed timbers, he discovered that curatorial teams wanted to display pristine cross-sections rather than raw, weathered beams. He objected, arguing that the patina of age, nail holes, lichen stains, irregular grain was integral to each piece's narrative. The disagreement escalated into the museum's boardroom, where Johnny delivered an impassioned talk on the ethical imperative to honor history's marks rather than sanitize them for aesthetic appeal. He threatened to withdraw entirely unless the exhibit design embraced raw authenticity. The museum eventually relented, creating a mixed-media installation that juxtaposed polished cross-sections with untouched antique timbers alongside oral history recordings. The exhibit became a museum bestseller and a case study in balancing curatorial vision with historical integrity. At the same time, Johnny grappled with the changing landscape of digital content. His Timber Revival channel now faced competition from influencers offering quick-fix salvage hacks and sponsored one-hour barn rebuilds that glossed over critical moisture and structural checks. Rather than launch a feud, Johnny doubled down on collaboration. he invited fellow craftsmen and academics onto his show to discuss pitfalls of rapid build culture and emphasize the science behind long-term preservation. He produced many documentaries comparing real timber restoration with accelerated barn flip experiments, highlighting stories of structures that failed when builders overlooked vital steps. These episodes garnered viral attention, prompting industry conversations on ethical standards for broadcast restoration content. Through measured dialogue rather than confrontation, Johnny positioned himself as a bridge between enthusiasts hungry for speed and professionals committed to substance. As 2023 drew to a close, Johnny's journey came full circle. He stood before a crowd at the opening of the Timber Arts Museum and Training Center, a restored textile mill he helped transform into an interactive heritage site. The museum's soaring atrium featured suspended beams salvaged from a half-hidden Appalachian grist mill, while workshops downstairs hosted apprentices carving dovetail joints beneath tall factory windows. He looked out at smiling faces, students, volunteers, policymakers, colleagues, and recognized that his path, from Barnwood Builders carpenter to global steward of timber traditions, rested on a foundation of unwavering principles. He reminded attendees that every project, whether on network television or in a rural community hall, demands patience, respect, and an abiding curiosity for the stories wood carries. That message, more than any fame or ratings, defined what truly happened to Johnny Jett. He became a guardian not only of barns, but of craftsmanship, history, and the enduring legacy that lives wherever reclaimed timber finds new purpose. Beyond the silo lab, Johnny's impact rippled into education, philanthropy, and policy, transforming a one-man workshop into a movement for mindful restoration. Having established the Timber Arts Museum, he partnered with Marshall University's Forestry Department to co-create a semester-long curriculum in timber conservation studies. Students traveled to Johnny's studio for hands-on labs and returned to campus to analyze the environmental impact of adaptive reuse versus fresh harvests. The program featured modules on moisture monitoring, historic paint analysis, and ethical sourcing. Each summer, 20 undergrads cataloged endangered barns across rural West Virginia, contributing to the National Barnwood Database and open-access archive documenting thousands of structures with photos, floor plans, and condition reports. Over 6 months, volunteer contributors submitted more than 1,000 entries, guiding preservation efforts nationwide. In tandem with academic collaborations, Johnny launched weekly live-streamed fireside chats. Every Thursday evening, he stoked a wood stove in the silo lab and fielded viewer questions in real time. Topics ranged from the chemistry of tannins in century-old oak to the ethics of reselling reclaimed pine at artisan furniture markets. Guest experts included architectural historians, chemists testing lead paint flakes, and fellow woodworkers demonstrating Japanese joinery. These unedited conversations drew thousands and underscored his belief that open dialogue fuels stewardship. He implemented a moderated Q&A system prioritizing constructive engagement over trolling, a model now studied by digital community managers in youth mentorship. Johnny's philanthropic vision crystallized in the Wood Heritage Fellowship, a competitive grant awarding seed funding to citizen scientists and artisans under 40. Fellows preserved everything from a Quaker meeting house in Ohio to a collaborative weaving workshop repurposing pattern boards in Kentucky. Each resident spent a month at the Silo Lab and culminated their work in a public showcase. The fellowship enlarged his professional network and diversified restoration fields, elevating voices previously ignored. Recipients called it a career-defining opportunity, enabling transitions from hobbyists into heritage professionals. Of course, expansion brought critics. In late 2022, purist conservators accused Johnny of overenthusiastic interventions for using modern epoxies to reinforce split beams. At a national preservation conference, an expert challenged his methods, sparking a published debate in a peer-reviewed journal. Johnny responded by convening a technical committee to test alternative adhesives, publishing open-source white papers on long-term performance. These rigorous side-by-side trials bridged traditional craft and modern material science, guiding nonprofit projects and academic research alike. On the local front, Pendleton County tourism surged after his international series drew weekend visitors eager to tour the Silo Lab. While businesses celebrated sold-out airbnbs and expanded menus, some resident craftsmen worried that commercialization might dilute regional traditions. To address this, Johnny launched the Pendleton Artisan Guild, offering free professional development and marketing support to local woodworkers and blacksmiths. Quarterly meetings in a rebuilt heritage hall ensured that economic benefits flowed throughout the community, not just into his own enterprises. As 2023 closed, Johnny quietly set milestones for 2024, the Timber Arts Museum's official opening, release of his field guide Reclaimed Wisdom, expansion of the Wood Heritage Fellowship into Latin America, and a second season of Beyond the Barn set for New Zealand. Yet his core ethos remains steadfast: patient celebration of material heritage, nurturing the next generation, and honoring the stories timber carries. He often says, restoration isn't about chasing the fastest reveal, it's about honoring the slow dance between human hands and wood's ancient rhythms. By early 2024, Johnny's efforts earned him the Lifetime Craftsman Award from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a recognition usually reserved for academic scholars. In his acceptance remarks, he credited the inquisitiveness of his apprentices and silent stories locked in each reclaimed beam. He reminded the audience that true preservation flourishes when curiosity guides hands honoring wood's layered past. As spring unfurled across Appalachia, Johnny returned to the roots of his calling, spending dawn hours in woodland clearings where he measured fallen beams against centuries-old growth rings. His sense of purpose had shifted from televised highlights to a broader stewardship of material heritage. Each beam reclaimed became a testament to the region's resilience and a reminder that every structure carries hidden narratives. This deeper vision guided the final chapter of his journey, one that transcended fame and focused instead on the lasting impact of patient, informed craftsmanship. In practical terms, he expanded the Silo Labs Fellowship to include an annual residency for preservation journalists, ensuring the stories of saved barns reached audiences beyond craft circles and policy forums alike. His field guide, Reclaimed Wisdom, went into a second printing within months of release, beloved not just for its detailed diagrams but for its first-person reflections on the interplay between tool and timber. Universities across North America integrated its case studies into graduate seminars on sustainability, cultural geography, and rural economics. Licensing agreements allowed digital scans of his hands-drawn joinery plans to be used in interactive museum exhibits from Nova Scotia to New Zealand, closing the loop on his international influence. As students manipulated 3D models of dovetailed corner posts, they experienced firsthand the tactile lessons Johnny had filmed in his most unhurried tutorials. Meanwhile, the nonprofit Barnwood Heritage Trust marked its 10th anniversary by hosting a global summit in Copenhagen, inviting delegates from Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Johnny's keynote, delivered via live video link from the Silo Lab, wove personal anecdotes about the West Virginia barns that shaped his career with calls for transnational collaboration on timber reuse best practices. He announced a new digital platform, TimberShare, designed to crowdsource condition reports on endangered structures worldwide. Within weeks, architects in Japan uploaded data on Kura warehouses, and heritage groups in Sweden shared blueprints of stave churches, creating a dynamic online atlas of aging wood architecture, a living legacy of his confidence in community-driven preservation. Back in Pendleton County, Johnny oversaw the final touches on the Timber Arts Museum's interactive wing, where visitors used augmented reality headsets to see historic barns rebuilt step by step. He reminisced with apprentices about the first skeleton of his grain silo studio, marveling at how that humble conversion had grown into an international hub for mindful restoration. As volunteers affixed the last plaque honoring local craftspeople whose names seldom made headlines, Johnny realized that the museum itself was more than a repository, it was a beacon, beckoning citizens and scholars to join the slow, deliberate art of timber revival. On the personal front, he settled into a rhythm of quiet satisfaction. Weekends were devoted to family workshops at a restored millworker's cabin he'd built for his sons. There, beside the crackle of wood stoves and the click of folding rulers, he passed along the philosophies that had guided his career: curiosity before efficiency, respect before spectacle, and patience before promise. Each lesson carried echoes of his grandfather's barn lessons and the hundreds of carpenters he'd mentored in the Silo Lab. Watching young hands trace the grain on aged boards, he recognized that stewardship was not just about saving structures, it was about nurturing the next lineage of caretakers. Looking ahead, Johnny plans to codify his experiences in an oral history series, capturing the voices of longtime apprentices and community elders alongside his own. He envisions a decentralized network of microlabs, small studios modeled on the Silo Lab, where rather than traveling to him, artisans can learn in their own backyards. These local hubs will foster sustainable economies and cultural awareness, proving that the reverence for reclaimed timber need not be confined to remote valleys. In the end, what began as a quiet expertise on a DIY show became a global movement, one where the patience of a single craftsman showed us that true preservation thrives not in headlines but in the steady work of hearts and hands aligned in common purpose.